let's start with verse 47. It says, when evening had came, the boat was out in the water, and he, being Jesus, was alone on the land. He saw that they were making headway painfully, for the wind was against them, about the fourth watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea. So Jesus he was there. Scholars tell us, in fact, one of the other Gospels tells us that they had gone out about 3 or 4 miles from the shore. So they weren't too far out, but it was not a far distance now to go where they were going. But they had only gotten out about that far, and it had been the fourth watch of the night, probably 4 hours or more. They had been out there, and they were tired. They were exhausted. And so he sees them. He knows their struggles. And he goes out to help them, unbeknownst to them. And in verse, this is verse 48. When he saw they were making headway painfully, for the wind was against them, and about the fourth watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea. He meant to pass them. But when they saw him walking on the sea, they thought it was a ghost and cried out. For they all saw him and were terrified. So let's put ourselves in the boat. We don't know how many people were in the boat. The apostles were there, so presumably 12, if all of them were present. Maybe some other disciples were in there with them. So there could have been 15 or 20 or 25 people in this boat. This was not a small little 2-person fishing vessel. This was a boat capable of carrying a number of people. And the wind is against them. There's no indication here that this was a huge storm. I think of this as being choppy waters. You know how when you go across you go across a lake on a bridge and you see the water and the little white caps that are going on? I think of that perhaps stronger than what you see there, but not lightning and thunder and huge waves of the sea. But the wind is pushing against them. They're trying to go west. The wind is pushing toward the east, out of the west. They're trying to go west. The wind is coming out of the west. And so they're having a hard time. And so Jesus goes, and Mark says he meant to pass them, but they do see him. And you're in the boat, and you look out. It's dark. The wind is blowing. The waves are white capping and crashing against the boat. You're exhausted, and you look out across the sea a little ways, and you see a human figure out there. What is it? They were terrified. Oh, it's a ghost! It's a ghost! What are we going to do? It's a ghost! And Jesus immediately spoke to them in verse 50 and said, "Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid." He got into the boat, the wind ceased, and they were astounded. Now, that's Mark's retelling of this. Matthew gives us a little more detail. He goes on a little bit farther with this. And so if we read in Matthew chapter 14, beginning with verse 28, if you read in Matthew's account all down through verse 37, it reads, if you put them side by side, it's almost verbatim, the account of this. The same words, take heart, it is I, do not be afraid. They were terrified. They thought they'd seen a ghost. All of these things. And Mark stops right there and says, he said this, and then he got in the boat. Matthew gives us a little extra detail where he says in Matthew 14, beginning with verse 28, and Peter answered him. Jesus said, it's me, guys. Okay, don't be afraid. It's just me out here. So Peter, who's going to do this but Peter? Right? Verse 28, Peter answered him, Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water. Now, I don't know what Peter was thinking was going to happen here. But Jesus said, come on. Come on, step out of the boat. Verse 29, he said, come. So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me. Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying to him, O you of little faith, why did you doubt? Now, here's a question. How far did Peter walk? How far did Peter walk in the water? How far was Jesus from the boat when they saw him? We don't know. Close enough that they could see him. Now, they're out on the sea, and remember, they probably had some light on the boat. They had lanterns, likely, because they wanted to be able to see. It was dark. The moon might have been shining that night. It might have been a full moon. Might have been some light there. Perhaps they had a lantern or two on the boat so they could see what they were doing while they were trying to row. It was likely that they could see over toward Capernaum. They could see some lights over there, so they kind of knew where they were going, right? They had to be able to see. They didn't have GPSs back in those days. They couldn't say, like I did coming to church this morning, go to Millview Church of Christ, boom, there you go, here's your route, take this. They had to guide themselves by what they could see. Perhaps they used the North Star to figure out where they were going, or other stars in the sky to get their navigational direction. But they had just enough light that they could see a little ways out from the boat. How far was it? Was it as far as from me to Jeanette? Was it as far as from me to Terry or to Gabe? I don't know. But he was out of the boat. He was a few feet at least away from the boat. Close enough that they could see him in whatever ambient light was there. But far enough away that they couldn't tell who he was until he identified himself. And so Peter said, if it's you, Lord, if it is you, command me to walk on the water, to come to you on the water. Now, I don't know what Peter was expecting to get back from that. Maybe that was a challenge. Maybe he thought this is the devil out there and he's just imitating. I don't know. Was he surprised when the Lord said, come on, get out of the boat, come here? Maybe he was, but it didn't stop him from obeying. He got out of the boat, and it says he walked and he came to Jesus. How far was Jesus from the boat? Well, if he was as far as from me to Gerald, that's probably what, Gerald, about 20 feet maybe, from here to you? That means Peter would have had to walk on the water 20 feet. If he was from me to Gabe, that's probably more closer to 40 or 50 feet. He would have had to walk 40 or 50 feet to get to Jesus on the water. It wasn't until he got to Jesus, interestingly enough, that he looked around and realized the wind's blowing. wind is blowing. What am I doing out here? I'm 50 feet perhaps away from the boat. What am I doing out here? He'd already gone that far. And his faith decreased. At that point, to where he began to sink in the water. He fell into the water.
Well, I think he took his eyes off Jesus. That's kind of a message. He was looking at Jesus the entire time, and then he took his eyes off him and saw the wind. That's when he began to sink. So it was amazing that Jesus walked on water for over 3 miles.
Yes. So Valerie said, for those who couldn't hear that, and for the sake of the streaming, Valerie said he took his eyes off Jesus. As long as he was walking on the water toward Jesus, he had his eyes fixed on Jesus. I'm coming to you. You told me to come. I'm coming to you. When he got to him, he took his eyes off Jesus, and he realized the wind was blowing. Lord, save me. And Jesus reached down and pulled him up. He reached out his hand and took hold of him and said to Peter, why did you doubt? You don't have enough faith. Why did you doubt, Peter? Peter was an interesting guy, as y'all know. I went to, I've told y'all before, I use some artificial intelligence search engines to help me to find information about some of the things that we want to talk about, to try to put ourselves into these situations and to know these characters a little bit better. So I asked Perplexity, the Perplexity AI engine, I just put this question and I said, what words can we use to describe the personality of the Apostle Peter? What is it about Peter that would make him above all these other disciples that were in the boat, be the one to jump up and say, if it's you, I want to come out and see you. So this is what it came up with. Prominent, what they call big traits of Peter. These words: bold, impulsive, oh yeah, impulsive, outspoken, emotional, courageous, yet fearful, loyal, yet wavering, zealous, strong-willed, and a natural leader. Some of these words, all of them obviously describe Peter. Some of them fit very well into this story. Impulsive. Peter didn't have long to think about this. He immediately got up to the edge of the boat and said, hey, I want to come out there. If it's you, I want to come see you. He was courageous, yet he could be fearful. Yes, sir.
One thing that I've always taken from this is, I guess as an application standpoint, it is much easier to start your Christian walk than it is to finish. I think, when we begin, obviously we may go out of fear, we don't want to go to hell, and that thing. So, we become Christians, but I think it's much harder to finish. Essentially, it was a lot easier for him to kind of initially step out, I think. But it was harder for him to kind of finish that with his faith. And a little bit weak at that time.
Gabe said that in many cases, this is true, this has been true forever, I guess, it's easier to start your Christian walk than it is to finish it sometimes. You know, I remember what I thought about when you were saying that. I remember when I was baptized. I was 10 or 11 years old, 10 years old, I think. And I remember standing there in the church building after all that was over. Of course, people were coming up, congratulating me, hugging me, that kind of thing. And I remember thinking, right now, at this moment, I'm sinless. That was an amazing thing for a young guy to think about. I don't have any sin right now. Now, that didn't last long because we all sin. But it's easy to start that walk sometimes. And sometimes we come out of that and we're zealous, we're on fire, we want to live right, we want to have faith, we want to have courage. But as we get toward the finish line, can we keep that going? Christianity is a long distance race, isn't it? It's not a sprint. Being a Christian is something that we start and we have to keep at. Now, we all know Peter. Peter stumbled. He embarrassed himself many times. And he stumbled, but he got back up.
Well, I think he's instrumental in being an example to not only the disciples, but other people to show that Jesus accepted him in his impulsiveness, but also that anyway, he was taken down from.
Yes. Yeah, Peter was. He was a great example. He is a great example.
He encouraged others' faith,
Yes.
and that Jesus accepted him as he was.
Yes. Jesus accepted him as he was, with all of his faults. This is the same Peter who would go on to deny Christ 3 times and then go out and weep bitterly. But this is also the same Peter who ultimately preached the sermon, the first gospel sermon in Acts chapter 2, where 3,000 people responded. It's the same Peter who wrote the books, the First and Second Peter in the New Testament, in his old age, and was somewhat of a philosopher at that point. To have patience, to teach people, this is how you need to live. This is what you need to do. Some of the other things that it said about Peter. The positive aspects of his personality. He was enthusiastic. He was eager to follow and act. That's what he did here, wasn't it? He left his nets when Jesus called him. He steps out of the boat, walks on the water. He was devoted and loyal, one of Jesus' closest friends. Really part of the inner circle of the apostles, if you will. He was courageous and bold. He drew a sword and cut off Malchus's ear. Remember that? He later preached at Pentecost, as we just mentioned. And he appeared later before the Sanhedrin. He was a leader and an initiator. He often speaks for the group and takes initiative. And then he became a leading voice in the book of Acts. But some of his weaknesses were his impulsiveness and being impetuous is the word that was used here. Sometimes he acts before thinking. Walking on the water. What was I thinking? He walked on the water and then he sank. He rebuked Jesus at one point. He did cut off Malchus's ear. He was overconfident and boastful at times. He insisted he would never deny Jesus. I'll never deny you, Jesus. And yet he went on to do that multiple times. He was fearful and weak-willed. Sometimes he started bold, but he lost courage. as we see here. Sometimes he speaks before understanding. He was over self-confident at times. But all through his life, he learned what he needed to do, how he could change. And he became, of course, a leader through the book of Acts and beyond. Scholars summarize his temperament as strong personality. He was quick to take initiative. He was zealous and passionate and intense. He was torn between deep devotion and overactive fear or self-confidence. He gradually transformed into a steady, Christ-like leader who mentored people as he got older. It summed it up this way. He said a simple description that you could use in a Bible study is this. Peter was a bold, impulsive, strong-willed leader, devoted deeply to Jesus, but often driven by emotion, fear, and overconfidence, whom Christ patiently shaped into the steady shepherd of his people. Jesus never gave up on Peter. But he let him know, in this case, why do you have so little faith? Why do you fear? Oh, you of little faith. He let him know, I'm with you. I'm here. So what kind of lessons can we take from this story? We have about 7 minutes left. 6 minutes.
I think it gives us, if we have a similar personality as him, it gives us hope that we can still be a strong follower of God and be productive at it. And a lot of people fault him for taking his eyes off Jesus, but he didn't have the courage to step out of the boat. And a lot of us may not ever step out of the boat.
That's a good point. Livonia said some people fault him for losing his faith and getting distracted when he got to Jesus. But he had the courage to step out of the boat.
But
He had the
shows
courage.
It shows how the world can bombard you by the outside forces, the wind of the storm, storms of life can take you.
The storms of life. Boy, that's a phrase we've heard for a long time, isn't it? The storms of life.
So we gotta have the courage to get out there.
Here's some of the things that I found that some scholars and commentators mention. What can we learn from Mark's account and from this story? Number one, Jesus sends us into the storms, not just out of them. If you look back at Mark, it says in verse 45, immediately he made the disciples get in the boat. He compelled them. He told them, you get in the boat. I'm going to stay here for a little while. You get in the boat and go. Get out. Get out of here. Go back home. And I'll see you later. He made them get in the boat. Did he know that the storm, that the wind was going to push against them? Absolutely. But the storm was not outside of his plan. Showing that the difficulty does not mean that you miss God's will, but often he uses trials as a classroom for deeper trust and maturity. Jesus sends us into the storms of life. Number two, you are never unseen, even when you feel alone. While Jesus was on the mountain praying, Mark says he saw that they were making headway painfully. Jesus saw them, even though he was not with them physically at the moment. He could see the storm that they were going into, the difficulty that they were having, even though he was not standing there in the boat with them. While Jesus was on the mountain praying, he saw they were making headway painfully. And in the same way, he sees you and me struggle long before you see him. And his apparent delay is not absence, but purposeful timing for your growth. And I'm going to tell you on a personal level, I've seen this. I've seen it in the last few years. I've seen this happen in my life. I've seen it happen in our family's life. Where God sees the storm coming, but the storm still happens. We have to weather the storm. And we have to keep our eyes, like Peter, we have to keep our eyes on Jesus while we're walking on the water, so to speak. While we're walking through that storm. And if you take your eyes off of Jesus, then the chances of you sinking grow greater. There's a little song that we sing. I just thought about this. There's a little song that we sing. It only has like a couple of lines. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face. And the things of earth will grow greatly dim in the light of his glory and grace. I think that's the words, right? Turn your eyes upon Jesus. As long as Peter had his eyes on Jesus, he wasn't going to sink. It wasn't until he realized that the waves were coming in, the wind was there, that he began to sink. Number 3, the very thing that we fear is under his feet. The sea in Scripture often pictures chaos and danger. Jesus walks on whatever threatens them. What overwhelms you and me, whether it's circumstances of life, people, inner battles that we struggle with, all those things are not overwhelming to him. In his hands, your greatest fear becomes the very stage where he can reveal his glory. Sometimes when we're going through struggles is when we realize that Jesus is doing more for us than we ever realized that he was doing. Number 5, in the last minute that we have, storms train us to call on him. Many commentators have noted that by not stopping the storm from the shore, which he could have done, by not stopping the storm from the shore, Jesus was training these disciples to depend on and call to him even when he was not physically visible to them. Likewise, seasons where God feels distant are invitations to cry out, trust his character, and discover that he can come to you in ways that you do not expect. One of the things that if you listen to me lead a prayer sometimes, I will say a phrase like, bless us, or bless this family that's going through struggles, or bless whatever it is, in ways that they cannot imagine. Jesus can do things for us in ways that we can't, in our minds, conjure up. And it's always better than we can imagine it to be. The wolves are at the door. Let's pause there, and we will continue our study next week. Thank you for your time this morning. We'll begin our worship in a few minutes.